This is Long Way to the Top, and I'm your host, Shane Bryan. This is a bit of a throwback to the days of Jesus Christ Superstar. Jon Stevens, Kate Ceberano, back on stage together, playing all of their hits. And I've got Kate Ceberano on the line right now. How are you?
Hello.
Massive.
I'm excited. I've got so much invested in this gig. Apart from getting back together with Jon, which I just love. But we decided we were also going to bring John Farnham into the house, even though not physically, but we're doing some of his material as well, and some In Excess and all sorts of stuff. So it's like kind of old school week.
You know, I was looking back at that. One of the things that I really thought about back then was how amazing it was that it was not just you and John, but also John Farnham as well. You know, what an incredible event.
It was beyond. I mean, actually, if you had another John, there was John Waters in there as well.
There was too, yes.
And Russell Morris, Angry Anderson was in the cast as well.
Well, he was Pontius. Was he Pontius? Yeah. It was Herod. That's right.
Yeah. The very, very best. The very, very best cast. But having said that, though, I just had a call last week from Mahalia Barnes, who's just gorgeous.
Yes.
And she said, I really want your blessing because I'm going to be playing Mary in the theatre run, which is coming up in this year as well.
Yes.
I was like, mate, are you kidding me? I got the royal, baton pass from Marsha Hines, and now I'm that girl giving it to Mahalia. It felt amazing.
Oh, that is incredible. Look, I heard that was coming, and I thought, Mahalia Barnes, if there was anyone, that could take on that role from you, it was her.
Absolutely. Oh, I'm all about her, and obviously the family. We're all dear friends, but it is a special time. It's 50 years of Superstar this year.
Yes.
And then you add to that, just I guess being around John for most of my life, to finally actually get in and out on tour together. We've got a cracking band.
Yeah.
It's going to be singers on fleek. It's going to be insane.
It's incredible. You're talking about rock royalty, and yes, you and John are rock royalty. It all seems to have come back full circle again, and here we are talking about, your concert with John and Cold Chisel performing again. It's like back in 80s and 1990s again.
Yeah. I think people. Well, look, I'm not going to try to imagine why that's happening, but I can sort of feel that people are very nostalgic. They want to have their memories and experiences. They want to go back and decide, where was I when I was doing that? And a lot of life has changed. I mean, just before we got onto our live radio, say, you and I both discussed life before COVID. I can't underestimate the amount of impact that's had on the industry and audiences alike.
Yeah.
People want a lot more from the concert experience. They want an experience where they feel like they're just as equal to the experience as the person on stage, and that's definitely what it's going to be like with us.
I think, though, if COVID taught us anything, and that was that we could use social media to keep our names in the public eye. And I know you did it very well on Instagram. I'm a big follower of you on Instagram. Barnesy did it well. Yeah. And look, it was like a bit of an insight. Like we couldn't get out there and see you on stage. So you invited us into your life.
Yeah, it got really personal, didn't it?
Yeah.
I actually don't have any regrets actually on being that private with people. We were certainly in Victoria. It was a state that was given some significantly different terms of existence than most of the other states. And if you put it into perspective, the industry that are beyond us, like the ones you don't see, are the guys who put up the lights, they take down the show, they are getting all of the electronics and the electricity and everything involved in getting the equipment to arrive on time. And there's so much involved in putting on a show. Now, a lot of those operators weren't eligible for any kind of funding during any of the 3 years of Victorian lockdowns. So we, I know Jimmy and I, we just thought if we're the elders, then we just got to lead by example.
Yeah.
I raised a lot of money for Support Act and donated a lot of my art and sales for my art to go into helping look after artists who were really, really, really struggling.
Yeah.
And I know that Jimmy did that as well. I mean, just the morale. He just fought people by the fire, and he said, switch on to us at 6:30. You'll have my entire family singing for you, and we'll be, and he just
every day.
It was unbelievable.
Every day.
He was absolutely, and he's absolutely, heroic. I just adore the family.
You guys were very inspiring, and you did do things that were different, but you're no stranger to doing things different. I remember when you first came out with I'm Talking, you were described as, pioneering New York style art pop during a period that I think you called the Jurassic period of pub rock. Yeah. It was very cool, right?
Quote, Kate Ceberano.
Very good quote.
True, and I mean, it was fairly simple. I mean, you kind of mostly had men.
Dinosaurs, I might say.
well, no. I mean, actually, I was all for it. I never questioned it, even as a kid. But when I started to open up, I mean, it was an eye-opener to be in the wings, and I was watching suddenly Chrissy Amplet and Renee. They were part of my growing up, and sort of looking at them and going, well, hang on a minute. There's too few of them, and I don't identify per se as a rock singer. I was an entertainer. I loved pop and jazz and all sorts of stuff, and I really wanted to make a statement. But they taught me how to take pop onto the stage. They were like, you can't faff around with live people.
Yeah.
If they're bored, you got to change your vibe. You got to look and touch the wrist of every listener in the room and feel their pulse and go, how is this? Is this quickening it for you? Is this doing something? So I actually, I learnt how to be me literally on the stage.
Yeah.
And that was a fantastic education, and it was one that has taken 40 years to kind of get sort of under my skin and feel like, okay, all right, I'm safe, I'm happy, I can sit with this and, stop wishing I was someone else. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, and what you're saying about touching every member of the audience on the wrist, I think that shows the success of even artists out there today. Why do the young people love Taylor Swift so much? Because she connects with the audience in such an intimate way. It's vital.
She is. She's constantly asking questions. She's saying, hey, how are you doing? Are you enjoying this?
Yeah.
Is this something you really want? And then what she does too, which I really respect, is the moment she feels bored with herself, she just kills off a former self and becomes someone new. And I reckon in the arts, you should never get too stuck on who you are, or who you think you are anyway.
Yeah.
And you should always be willing to change and evolve and become bigger, bolder, and that includes being like, if you feel it, you can also be very private and go back to being personal. The great artists that I've loved in my life, like Chrissy Hynde or Bob Dylan, Leonard Cohen, there was a moment where they'd give so much, and then they'd go, but hang on, I just need a little time for myself here for a minute.
Yeah. Yeah,
and they
absolutely.
go into then do something that's kind of quite private. You lose a few audience along the way. People rest you as a brand, but then they come back to you if you're half good.
Yeah, and I think there's been a lot of artists throughout the years that have done that. And one of those artists I want to talk about, you've actually you recorded with a couple of years back, and that was Steve Kilbey. But before we talk about that,
he's the king of Australian. He's the sound of Australian music.
He is.
He's like the Tim Winton of sonic kind of literature. I can't rate him enough, I've got to tell you.
Yeah, me too. Well, we're going to talk about that in a sec. Let's we'll just quickly have a listen to one of your big hits from Jesus Christ Superstar, and when we come back, we'll continue our chat.
Okay.
Chatting with Kate Ceberano, and that, of course, was her big hit from Jesus Christ Superstar that charted so incredibly. Did you find it unusual that a song like that would chart so big in the Aussie charts?
Yeah. I I think that the 80s brought a kind of freedom to people's listening pleasure. There was, if you were to go onto any radio channel back then, and it would have had like everything from Ian Dury and the Blockheads to the Police.
Yeah.
There would have been a bit of Bob Marley, maybe mixed up with a bit of UK Squeeze, and then you might, a little later into the 90s, you would have heard Split Ends, and you would have heard a mishmash of Daryl Braithwaite. I mean, I'm just going from everywhere to tell the sound that was acceptable, the kind of the crash collision of styles. You were actually allowed to really mix it up, and the audience they'd love it. I don't know why they think that we've become so stupid that we can only handle one thing at a time or something.
Well, that's why we play those same songs today. I mean, that's our station right there, because well, all roads lead to Rome, because the first thing you ask me is, why do you think you guys are here and doing these things? It's because there's something captured in the memory of that. The fact of also, I might just add that Jon and I are really big singers. Yeah.
It's a very visceral, physical thing for us. And just like all the Motown singers, and, you know, I plan to sweat and dance, and I'm not going to hold anything back. We do that as though our life depends on it, gig in, night out. And I think that's another thing that was like a real key, like a touchstone from the 80s. It was like sort of the very thing that we expected from artists, is that they would just throw themselves off a cliff to entertain you.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of them did that. They gave everything. Most of them did that. They just gave everything and then more. Yeah. Yeah,
because I think there's some idea like there's a limit to your love.
Yeah.
But there actually isn't.
Yeah.
You just make more love.
Yeah. Now, one of the songs in the recent times that I have loved, it's one of those. I don't know what it is about it, but it just grabs me every time I hear it, and that is Monument City Lights. And you did that.
Oh my God!
How many times do you hear that in an interview? Not very often, right?
No, it's sort of like that album is like this. It's like a sleeping giant. I don't understand. I think it's because, I don't know why. Maybe because it was a pre-COVID thing. But I have to tell you, I made that album with Steve Kilby and a friend of mine, Sean Sennett, and I hadn't met Steve. I received words, lyrics, and poetry from him, and then I composed all the music.
Yeah.
And we did it all separate. I didn't meet him until after the record was finished.
Wow.
It was the greatest love letter you could ever write to someone who you absolutely worship, which I do. I love Steve Kilby.
And his time with the church is just phenomenal. And they're still going, you know?
No, I know. Well, the music I wrote, you see, I wrote it in the style of, because I was saying to him, this music has made me feel things in my most, formative years, and you're in and under my skin. Like this is where you are, and I don't know if people actually know much about it, but I think Monument City Lights is like, it's sort of like if I were a Tim Winton novel, I'd want that as the soundtrack for my film.
Love it. Love it. If you haven't heard it yet, jump on YouTube, take a listen to it. It's and then buy the album. Get the vinyl. It's amazing. Is there still vinyl left? There may be.
Yeah, probably. I mean, it's there if you want it. You just got to ask.
Just got to ask. Now we're also talking about going into your background over the on social media, and Gypsy Lee.
Yeah,
so talented. This is your daughter.
Oh, mate,
she is amazing.
She's actually doing, and in her own way, she's like, we don't have voices at all similar, which is great. We'll never be compared to each other. She actually reminds me of a young Kate Bush, she's completely original. Her work is entirely written with her and a producer and her, and it's really distinctive. I'm really proud of her. If she can sustain herself and not, freak out about the fact that these things, they take time and you have to invest in audiences, but they'll come on board if you really mean it,
Yeah. Yeah, incredible voice, and she just, I guess I could just have to say she's a diva. There you go,
mate. She's gorgeous.
She is a diva. So
she's a diva. She, I love her to bits. So I'm I'm watching it. I don't give advice, and I don't coach her, and I'd certainly have never given her a singing lesson, and that's been intentional because I think, whilst music lessons are imperative, but a person will find their way to communicate in the way that's distinctive to them. And I just think that I just thought if I were to put too much of my influence or opinion, it would, just because she's so sweet and she loves me very much, she would fall out of herself to help me. And I didn't want her to. I was just like, stay within yourself, stay within the lines. Don't come over to this side and do it for me. Do it for you.
Because it's hard for parents sometimes, if they see their son or their daughter excelling in something, they want to become like the super parent behind them.
Right.
But it can be dangerous to do that.
Look, I think it's horses for courses. And also certainly each industry has a different measure of success, right? So, I mean, if you were handing on the tools of, I don't know, a family business where, I mean, actually, to be honest with you, the kind of things that I am rigorous with her about is like on giving her prediction on how it is to talk with people and how to care and look after people that you're working with. As a family business, my business is communication, and there are times when you get it wrong and there are times you get it right. You've just got to be more right than you are wrong,
Yeah, I love that.
I mean, you can't always be right, but you can definitely try to be more right than wrong. But as far as like you said, not influencing her, I think we're in a culture where we are kind of, there's a lot of intervention, let's face it. I don't know about you and what decade you were raised in, but the 70s was lawless, and we were raised like free-range chickens. I mean,
pretty much. The moment,
we woke up and we just left, and we didn't come back until the day was done. And oh my God, the things we did! And
I know our parents would die if they actually knew half the stuff of what we did.
Right, but we have, but centuries and centuries of civilization has been living like that.
Yeah,
and it's just gotten so that now, because the escalation of social media and needing to have that sort of short leash on our brains, we are constantly connected to good and bad information, and it does terrify me to think about, what kids are exposed to these days.
Yeah.
It's a different time.
It is a completely different time. And we should talk about your concert because that's what you're here about. It's on Sunday, 10th of November at Princess Theatre. And, of course, before that, if you want to catch you in Hobart, you're at Federation Concert Hall the night before. And I've found out that you've actually got a bit of Tasmanian heritage in you. Some of you
have just a bit of Tasmanian heritage, mate. I'm like hardcore early starter.
You're one of the early settlers.
I'm like, no, but even more than that. Oh, you'll have to. That's a whole other story. Of which I went on Who Do You Think You Are?
Oh yes,
and
yes.
It was like jumping down the rabbit hole. But long story short, you know how they always go into those. The archives of arrivals.
Yeah.
And there was this amazing kind of document, and it gave the name of my ancestor, and it said profession, and it said painter, musician.
Painter, musician.
He'd been brought over from England to teach as an art teacher, and he composed music.
Wow.
At a girls' college. And I just looked at it, I was like, oh, that's actually amazing, because, you often wonder how much of life is offered to you genetically, how much do you take from the people you come from, and, do we take things like that? Do we take, subjective skills like art and music? But clearly, it's like it's
true story.
Right for my family.
Yeah, I love that. It was foretold. There you go. You're going to be an artist.
There you go. Yeah, I was either that or a musician or apparently a stripper, which was the other thing I wanted to do when I was a kid.
Horses for courses. Now, if you would like to...
I better back that up with a reason why I wanted to... No, I don't know.
Now, well, you did... Oh, no, I'm not even going to touch the whole Mary Magdalene thing. I'm not going to go there. Not going to go there. So,
the world's most famous prostitute.
If you would like to see Jon Stevens and Kate Ceberano in concert, then grab your tickets from Princess Theatre. I think Theatre North, you can get your tickets from. And 10th of November is when you're going to be here. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. I love your work, and I love just everything just about your family now that I know it so intimately on social media.
Well, thank you. We're not ashamed to sort of overshare, but definitely we're a travelling circus. Yeah. And thanks for noticing.
Thanks, Kate Ceberano. Thanks for joining us on the show.
See ya. See ya.
Hit plus or follow to subscribe to the podcast, and head over to Facebook at The Long Way to the Top Podcast and give us a like. Keep on rocking, and I'll catch you on the next episode of Long Way to the Top.